Welcome to another segment of provocative conversations destined to provoke further thought and spark greater questions regarding God, church, and the religious establishments of both the past and the present. I am the proud heretic, Mr. Provocateur himself. Today, I want to begin part 2 on the subject in relation to your so-called will. As I have stated, it is not your will. It is not about your schedule, your planning, your abilities, your education, or anything of the sort. It's never you, even though it is you. You see, God uses you to do a thing, but it doesn't mean that it's you who's actually doing the thing. Not necessarily. Man has got over, the church has got over, Adam has got over into the thought that apart from me, apart from my will, when in actuality, we have no so-called will, not in relation to how we utilize the word will and the power of the will, how we describe it, how we give this so-called will, this human will, this free Willy to do whatever we want to do and just be nilly-willy, just doing whatever we want to do freely. Nothing about that is God. Nothing about that speaks of humility. It's almost like our current day president. One of the things that he says, and I know that this touches some of you, or it may touch some of you that I speak on him. Some of you are just afraid to speak about him because, you know, that you say, what the Bible says, pray for those in authority. You don't understand what that Bible means. That, you know, that Bible told you to don't seek to be free. Perhaps maybe that's why some of you are just following the political sway right now, because you don't seek to be free. But if that's your mindset, you need to make sure you go to work on Martin Luther King's birthday. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You need to and you don't need to celebrate the 4th of July, because we were wrong for breaking away from Great Britain. Because we should have never sought to be free from those who were over us. See, it's a twisted thought, and it takes on a different meaning. And then you have to dig deeper to justify how you celebrate those days. But yet, when I speak on stuff dealing with the political sway of today at the time of this recording, you take it personal and you don't apply those Martin Luther King picnics and birthdays and travels that you have, those 4th of July plans that you plan out and you fulfill, but yet you don't want the freedom. You don't want to hear anyone speak on, say, those in leadership, because somehow the fear factor has gotten the best of you and you see that as being wrong. You see that as being working against the hand of God. When you speak out on these things, do you realize that's what the slave master wants you to feel? And I'm not into this black movement, this Black Panther thing of anything of the sort. I'm just talking straight facts, straight truth. Do you know the slave master wanted you to feel that you could not ever approach him, that you could never stand up and, how would I say, you could never stand up or go against him. You could never picket what he's saying. You could never question what he was saying. And if you did, these would be the results. This is what pastors are doing. This is what churches are doing. This is what religion is doing. This is what denominations are doing. I refuse to allow religion, denomination, churches, collared cloth men, women of the cloth, to tell me what I can and can't do in relation to certain things. There are some things that you need to hear people who are in spiritual position or in a position knowledge wise, experience wise, to be utilized by God for whatever thing it is, not just in the political arena. But you need not be afraid of standing up against the political jargon that has taken place and that is running rampant right now in our society. People need to begin to speak forth the truth. I don't hate the president. I don't hate politics. How would I say? I do hate politics. I don't hate those in the political arena, congressmen, senators, any of those people, lawmakers. I understand they have to do what they have to do. But I do hate a lot of their practices, and I hate what they are upholding and sitting mute and dumb while it's occurring. I do not like that. I do speak out against that. But anyway, it is not wrong for you to speak forth the truth, no matter who it is. You need to go back and read Jeremiah. You need to go back and read Isaiah and Ezekiel. You need to read these people. Look at Daniel even. You need to look at these people. You need to look. You could have never have been of Joseph. Why? Because Joseph had to tell the truth about the Pharaoh's dream, and that could cost him. You could never be a Daniel. Why? Because Daniel had to put forth what was going to happen to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel had to put it forth. You could never be a Jeremiah crying loud and sparing not. You could have never have been in the dungeons and the wells and whatever else they put Jeremiah in because of what he stood up for. You could have never have dealt with Isaiah. You could have never have told the king what Isaiah had to tell. You could never be a Samuel. You could never be a David. Why would you want to live like that? Why would you want to be so limited to where and how God could use you? Because you have no spine, because you're afraid, because you hide behind these fear-based verses that may or may not have anything to do with anything that God said or that God is promoting or upholding today or yesterday. But anyway, we're moving on. In relation, don't even know how I got over there, but that's all good. In relation to your so-called will, we stopped at Psalms 127, 1 and 2, where it says, except the Lord builds a house, your labor is in vain. Unless the Lord protects a city, you sitting up all night worrying, trying to take care, trying to feel. God's got all of that taken care of. Why? Because God wants his loved ones to get their proper rest. That's what we need to learn how to do. And I've come to learn how to get my proper rest in that sense. Even though I don't sleep long lengths of time at all, I've still learned to let certain things be what they are, many things be what they are, because I understand except the Lord does it. My will, my so-called will, my workings, my doings is in vain. Again, I said these verses are going to teeter over into pride. Even though this is not headed towards pride, we will touch pride and humility along the way. It deals with humility and pride. In Genesis chapter 45 is going to be in the King James Version, and it's going to be in verses 7 and 8. But Genesis 45 picks up where Joseph was already put in position in Egypt, and his 11 other brothers, the sons of Jacob. The whole world at that time, that region, was experiencing a great lack of food. They had, I want to say, was it 7 years of plenty or 3.5 years of plenty, and then 3.5 years or 7 years of lack. However that goes, remember I said, I don't I don't always go for the specifics in a story now, not because I'm trying to change or play up things. It's just that certain things are not even important, and we've made those things so weighty and so important. And even if they are important, I'm not trying to reach the importance of those minor details, whether it was 4 years or 5 years. And I know for some people that means a lot. Why? Because the number 4 is for this and the number 5 is for that. And then we get all freaky. We get spiritually freaky. We get scary. We spookify everything. Somebody give you a sandwich with peanut butter and jelly. See the Lord. See, I feel the Lord right there. See, what it is, see, that B is for blessing. That's bread. And the number 2, that means a double portion. So wait a minute. And then the peanut butter, it starts with a P. That's for praise. The Lord wants you to praise him for everything you receive. And then the jelly, that's for joy. You got to always be joyous. So now you took bread for blessings. You took two pieces of bread and you brought that double portion, and then you took the P out of peanut butter and you made that for praise, and you took the J out of jelly and made that for joy. And see, the Lord is saying, when he blesses you and when he gives you that double blessing, he wants you to praise him. And he wants you to eat it with. Man, if you don't eat that peanut butter and jelly sandwich and be quiet, ain't nobody got time for all that spookified religious stuff. Stop always adding all of these antics and all of these. What are you doing? You're messing up the simplicity of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Eat the sandwich and be quiet. And by the way, you don't have to pray over everything. Lord, I bless you for this food. Lord, I thank you for this food. Bless the hands that prepared it. Why is you praying over everything? Why is you scared about everything? Did you pray over that woman you slept with last night, who wasn't your wife? Did you pray over that man you slept with, who wasn't your husband? Preacher, did you anoint that woman you were with last night who wasn't your wife? Evangelist, did you anoint that hotel room and put the blessings of God on that bed with that man or that woman you were with last night, yesterday, last week, last month? But we got to pray over everything. Man, please pray over. We ain't even praying. We just talking. We just doing the religious thing to do. Did I say all of that? Yes, I did. Hold on, because I might say some more. I don't know. Just hold on. Buckle your seatbelts. So anyway, Joseph was already in Egypt. His brothers sold him into Egypt. And he was in prison, whatever, and he was raised up to a position because of him being able to interpret the king's or the Pharaoh's dreams. And here we are now. One of the dreams came true, and the world has a lack of food, and Joseph is in position to help not only Egypt but help the world, as those in the then world had to travel to Egypt in order to get food, in order to survive. So here is Jacob's 11 other sons, Joseph's 11 other brothers, his father Jacob. He sends the brothers. I'm not sure if all the brothers went, but he sent the brothers. Jacob, the father, sent the brothers to Egypt, unbeknownst to them, not realizing Joseph was in Egypt, still alive. They were sent into Egypt to obtain food for the family to survive. And here it was, Joseph was in position. Well, when Joseph finally exposed himself to his brothers and showed them that, hey, I am he, your brother Joseph, the one who you thought was dead or whatever. Here I am. I'm still here. The brothers were afraid. They were like, oh, no way. Oh, man, he's going to really get us now, because now he's in position and he can get us back. And Joseph said to them in verse 7, he said, and God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Now, see, his brothers felt, oh, Joseph is going to hurt us. Joseph's going to do whatever because we did this and we did that. And Joseph said, no, it wasn't your will. In relation to your will, it had nothing to do with you. It was what God was doing. It wasn't what you did. It wasn't your will. Your will wasn't powerful enough to take me from my father. Your will wasn't powerful enough to put me in that well or whatever he was putting. His brothers threw him in and told his father that Joseph was killed by a wild animal. It wasn't in your willpower to sell me to those who were going into Egypt. It wasn't in their power for me to be sold into Egypt by them. It wasn't in Egypt's power to hold me. It wasn't in the Pharaoh's power to hold me. It had nothing to do with any of you, but rather it had everything to do with God and what God was doing. See, just because God uses you doesn't mean that it's you. Just because it's you, it doesn't mean that it was you. Because it definitely was Joseph's brothers who put him in that well. It definitely was his brothers who sold him. Yet Joseph said it wasn't you. He said, God sent me here before you so that I could save you all these years later. Verse 8 says, so now it was not you who sent me here. Wait a minute, hold the record. Now, Joseph, I read the story many of times. And now you're going to sit here and tell me that it wasn't you or it wasn't your brothers who sent you here. Joseph, how could you say that? How could you lie like that? Joseph, it was your brothers who sent you there. See, even though it's you, it's not you. Even though it's you, it's not you. Even though it's you, it's not you. Isn't that something? It was you, but it's not you. It's not you, even though it was you. It wasn't that Joseph was lying. It wasn't that Joseph was becoming senile in his older age. It was none of that. It was that Joseph had apparently the understanding, and God apparently gave it to him, showed it to him, that Joseph, it wasn't your brothers. Yes, your brothers did it, but it really wasn't them. Yes, they were behind it. They thought they were masterminding it in their own willpower, in their own human abilities, but really it wasn't them. So Joseph said, so now it was not you who sent me here, but it was God. Wow. So in relation to my will, it had nothing to do with me? Absolutely nothing. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Joseph knew God was the one who put him in the position that he was in. God was the one who the credit belonged to, not Joseph, but God. But most of all, he let his brothers know it wasn't you. So many times God has said to me, don't look at them. Don't look at her. It's not her. It's not them. But God, they did. I know, but it's not them. Even though they did it, I did it. Even though they're doing it, I'm doing it. Even though they're behind it or in it, I'm behind it and in it. Sometimes, most times, if not all times, we have to look beyond people, because it's not Adam. It's God. Let me say that again. It's not Adam. It's God. God. Acts chapter 17, verse 26. Acts 17 and 26. Anybody who knows me, I like to walk and jump, walk and jump, walk and jump. 17 and 26, it says, and he, meaning God, has made from one blood every nation of men. Well, that throws out racism. Doesn't matter what color your peanut shell is. What matters is what's inside of all of us. The same one blood of every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth. And he has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Let me help you here. What this verse is saying is God determined not only that we all are united through blood, through our Maker, but that God had already determined what times. There's a verse in the Bible that says, in the fullness of time, Christ came. Well, this verse here says that God had already determined when you and I would come on the scene of life. What generation, what century, what year, what month, what week, what day, what time of the day. God predetermined that before we ever came here. It has nothing to do with you. Has nothing to do with your mother or your father or your grandparents. God predetermined all of that and all of them as well. God has already determined not just our pre-appointed times, but he has also determined our boundaries, the boundaries where we'll live. So you mean to tell me that me being born in Florida was of God? Yep. Me born in Broward County was of God? Yep. Me born in Broward General Hospital in Fort Lauderdale was God? Yep. So you're telling me that he determined my birthday? Yep. So my birthday. So you mean to tell me that when I left Florida and say I went to North Carolina to Job Corps, God was in that? Yep. So God appointed a time for that to be part of my dwelling? Yep. So you mean to tell me when they moved me to Georgia, Job Corps, God was in that? Yep. No wonder my son was born there, because you had to appoint him and give him his appointed times as well. Yep. So you mean to tell me when I left and moved back to South Florida that God was in all of that too? Yep. And then when I felt that I, in my willpower, was joining the military, God was in that too? Yep. So when I ended up in the type job, the MOS that I was in, 19 kilo armor crewman, God was in all of that? Yep. And if he was in all of that, he already knew where I would go to basic training at. Yep. So that's why I ended up in Kentucky, of all places, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Yep. And then since he appointed the appropriate and the exact times and the timing of me being in basic training and me graduating from basic training, he knew that every armor crewman for the next however many months or years would leave straight out of basic training and end up in Germany, of all places. Yep. So you mean to tell me God had my dwelling in Germany, right? Yep. And all the way up to where I am now? Yep. God was working all of that. And I thought it was, and I got mad at the people who cut my orders. I thought, and so where I ended up, even though it was hard, he was, and even though I had to go through all this and I had to experience all of that, and I did this and I did, he was still in there, and he had me to be there knowing all of that. Yep. And his hand was in, yep. Look at Acts chapter 17, verse 26 in the New Century Version. Look what it says. God began by making one person, Adam. So if the storyline is straight, y'all, okay, we following the storyline of Genesis. God began by making one person. And from God came all the different people who live everywhere in the world. Wow, so it wasn't your mama, wasn't your daddy, wasn't your grandma, granddaddy, your great. Wow. It wasn't even the slave master who raped his women. Who raped his slaves. Huh. Wow. God decided exactly when and where they must live. Now, this is in the New Century Version. God decided exactly when and where you would live, Adam. If you think about it, Adam never did choose where he would live. God chose it. Adam never did choose when he would come on the earth. God did. Now, I know there's a thought out there that says that we probably agreed somehow in our previous life before this human experience to have said whatever. I'm not going against that. That is what it is. And people are promoting that, and I don't go against that. God decided exactly when and where they must live. Now, look at it in the NIV version. In the NIV version of this Acts 17 and 26. Look at what it says in the NIV. From one man, he made every nation of men. Man, we should stop hurting these migrants, these so-called illegal aliens. Man, we're all one. We should stop being so prejudicial under the name and in the auspices of love and God and one nation under God. One nation under God. One nation who fails to understand God. From one man he made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live. I believe that's micromanaging all the way up to you, your family, your siblings, your mother, your father, your grandparents. God settled them. God put them where they were. My mother's mother, my grandmother was in South Florida. My father's mother was in South Florida. My great grandmother was in South Florida. Both of my great grandmothers were in South Florida. I appreciate the fact of my grandparents and my parents raising me or being there in South Florida, how God placed them in beautiful South Florida. I appreciate that. I am thankful for that because there was no other place that I would have rather have lived than South Florida. South Florida was just great for me. It's still a place that I love to go to every time because of the beauty of it. The beauty of it has been taken over now by people from other nations and countries or whatever. Different. We always had a smuggler's board of different races there, but now you have more of certain races there or whatever. And the problems did come as a result of that, but that's not those people's fault. Those people came over not only because of how they were being treated in other countries, but because God appointed where these people would be and when their times would be and when they would migrate or travel to these different locations such as South Florida to live. So I don't hate on those people. But what I'm trying to say to you is you don't even get to choose where you live. You don't even get to choose what you do. You are not in as much control as you think. Your so-called will is not as powerful as you want to believe. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 10. Ecclesiastes 6 and 10. It says it like this, New King James Version. And then I'm going to read it in the New Living Translation. It says, whatever one is, he has been named already. Oh my, oh to the my. Are you telling me that whatever you are, you've already been named already? It seems funny, and I don't know why God would want to name a child Pookie. And I don't know why God would want to give somebody a name named Rakashalanda. I don't know why, but he does. He is in it. He's behind it. Now, some people say God is not whatever, that he would choose names or whatever. Well, I differ to a greater degree in that, but I do believe that God is. I know in the names that I named my children, and I know that I said that I named my children, but look where I'm going with it. I know the names that I named my children, and the names that I named my children, their names didn't even have space for a nickname or a middle name, rather, not a nickname, but a middle name. There was no reason to give them nicknames necessarily. But the names that I named my children, I named my children the names that I named them because I was doing certain things at the time that my wife went into labor, or at the time that my wife told me that she was pregnant. And I would be studying certain topics. And as I would be studying those Bible topics, either she would go into labor or she was coming home to tell me that, hey, we have another one on the way from a pregnancy test or whatever. I said, okay, well, I'm studying right now this. I'm at my desk studying this right here. I guess I'll name him or her this. So I know that God is in my kid's name. And I know that this verse may not fully be talking about people's name, but it may well. But it says, whatever one is, he has already been named already. For it is known that he is a man and he cannot contend with him who is mightier than he. Now look at the New Living Translation. It says, everything has already been decided. Now I like that. Everything has already been decided. Well, if everything has already been decided, what are we trying to decide? Where does my will come in at? How does my will affect? Is it really my will in relation to your so-called will, Adam? Is it really your will, Adam, that's doing whatever? How much are we here in this united, desired to be known as, but actually the divided states of America? Everything has already been decided. So how much does our vote truly count? I know, because of you are one who says if you don't vote, you're not an American. If you don't vote, you crucify Martin Luther King and all of those who fought for civil rights. Notice how we rarely get who we voted for in office. Notice that even if an election has to be cheated upon for certain people to win, they still win despite all the odds, despite all the prayers, even despite popularity votes. Notice how the electoral votes are so twisted, so unfairly concocted and carried out that you rarely see the popularity vote win, despite the fact of sometimes, and at least one case where the popularity vote was 3 million votes plus, perhaps above the actual electoral votes, and yet the electoral votes won. Let me read Ecclesiastes 6 and 10 again. New Living Translation. Everything has already been decided. Lord, have mercy. Everything has already been decided. God, why am I sitting up late? Why? Except the Lord builds a house, is labor in vain. It is foolish, senseless for you to sit up late. Get up early and go to bed late for that mighty dollar, for that mighty opportunity, for that hopeful this and that hopeful that, when God is wanting you to get rest. Why? Because everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be. Lord have mercy. It was known long ago what each person would be. Lord have mercy. None of this here. I don't know why we always talk about Lord have mercy. I don't know. It's just old terminology. I mean, after all, the Bible says God hates swine. But we always putting Ham on them. And then Ham's supposed to be cursed, right? Or at least his descendants, right? And then that's supposed to be black people, they say. That's the black folk. That's the black race. It was known long ago what each person would be. So you knew Joseph's brothers were going to do what they did. Of course I did. Because, see, it wasn't just that I knew, but that I don't want to get ahead of you there, because I have the divine hand of God, the fingerprints of God. I'll deal with that subject as a continuation as we continue to move, because it all ties together. Truth follows a plane. Truth stays consistent. Truth meets up with itself. So we'll get to that. It was known long ago what each person would be. So there's no use arguing with God about your destiny. There's no reason arguing to God about your destiny. So why all these long prayers? Why is all this fasting? If everything has already been decided. See, you can change the Lord's mind. No, you can't. Wrong answer. Sir, ma'am, wrong answer. So there is no use in arguing with God about your destiny. I'm going to do something on destiny. I'm going to do some eye-opening stuff on destiny that I've never heard anyone talk about. This is all that God gave me. And I'm going to share that as time goes on. You will want to hear destiny. You will want to hear it. Honestly, I want to hear it again. I want to hear it again. This is straight from God. For me, he spoke to me, but I want to share the nuggets, because the truths of a thing are still true. Even if God just speaks it to you, the truths of it can be applied outwardly as well. God, I think, is vertical and humanity is horizontal. God gives you something, you receive something vertically, but then you can spread it out horizontally as well. So when I receive nuggets from God, I share these nuggets. Right now, this particular topic here, I'm speaking scripturally, more so scripturally than anything else. But there'll be other things that God gave me specifically, and I will make known that this is what God told me specifically. And this is to share. A lot of it is to share. You know when something is to be shared and something is to be kept. But anyway, let me go over that one more time. Everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be. So there's no use arguing with God about your destiny. Again, I will deal with destiny at a later time, because I definitely want to deal with that. And you will want to hear it. And I'm not just selling you something. I'm telling you something. 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 5 through 13. 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 5 through 13 in the New King James Version. Okay, starting at verse 5, it says, "Now when King David came to Baharum, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei the son of Gera, coming from there. He came out." Now Shimei was a descendant of Saul. Remember Saul and his son Jonathan, they were both killed, just recently killed, or they had been killed, or really Saul committed suicide. But anyway, Shimei, one of Saul's family members, was bitter towards David because he felt that David was the demise of Saul. Although Saul was you can say Saul was his own demise, but it's greater than that because the hand of God. But anyway, he came out, Shimei, cursing continuously as he came, and he threw stones at David and all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. David traveled with the entourage, and these men were great fighters. Also, Shimei said thus when he cursed, he said, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue, because he felt that David stole the kingship from Saul. Apparently, the Lord brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in which place you have reigned. And the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom, your son. If you understand the story of David and Absalom, his son was rising up against David as well. So now Shimei is saying, just like you undermine Saul, your own son is undermining you, and God is doing it. So now he wasn't right though, but he was, but he wasn't. He was, but he wasn't. But anyway, even though it's you, it's not. So now you are caught in your own evil because you are a bloodthirsty man. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? David, why should we stand here and just let this man curse you like this here? Please let me go over and take off his head, David. And the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? He's basically saying, man, y'all ain't nothing but a bunch of killers, man. Y'all want to take the man's head off? So let him curse me, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Wow. He said, it's not his will. He's not doing this under his own volition. This isn't his own will. David said the Lord sent him to do this here. Sound like Joseph's brothers, huh? The Lord sent him here saying, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? David said to Abishai and all of his servants, see how my son, who came from my own blood, seeks to kill my life, talking about Absalom. How much more now may this Benjamite do the same? Basically, let him alone and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered it. Wow. David said, it's not even Shimei doing this. In relation to his so-called will, it's not even him. It's God. God's hand. God's working is in it. Sounds again like Joseph's brothers. God's hand and God's working was in it all. Joseph said, you didn't send me here, but God sent me here. It may be in verse 12 that the Lord will look on my affliction and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. And as David and his men went along the road, Shimei went along the hillside opposite of him and cursed as he went, threw stones at him and kicked up dust. In other words, Shimei just kept acting like a fool. And David allowed him to do that. David had to let it be what it was, because perhaps God was in it all. And it wasn't about Shimei's will. It was about God's will. So in relation to your so-called will, Adam, it's not you as much as you think it is. So even though it's you, it's really not. Even though it's them, it's really not. A lot of times people come after you. A lot of times people will target you and do just what Shimei was doing, or Shemaiah, however you want to say it. Do things that are equal to or greater than what Shimei was doing. And we have to realize that it's not them, that is God. Now, don't get me wrong, because you get mad. I get mad. But sometime in the course of the day, we're going to have to resort to the truth of the matter. And that is, in relation to their so-called will, is really not them. It's God. That's a hard thing, because I have another topic that's going to coincide with this, that's coming along with this, and it deals with in regards to affliction. So anyway, let's keep moving. John chapter 3, you have to apply these stories to your life. I can't personalize these stories exactly to your life. I can bring you to the knowledge of them. I can refresh your memory, but then you have to allow God and allow the Spirit of God and the experiences that God has assigned to your life to bring you into a greater truth, a greater reality of these verses. Take the literalness of it, take the metaphoricalness of it, take the allegorical message of it as well. Take it, apply it, allow your spiritual to connect with that which is already known within you. God in you, the hope of glory. John chapter 3, verse 27. John chapter 3, verse 27. I'm going to read it in the New King James Version first, and then I'm going to read it in two other versions. 3 and 27 of John. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. John answered and said, a man can receive nothing unless it has been given him from heaven. A man can receive nothing unless it has been given to him from heaven. That deals with salvation too. You can't receive it. It's only given. You can't earn it, not even by believing. It's given. A man can receive nothing except it was given from heaven. Whatever you have, whatever you possess, you can receive nothing unless it has been given to you from heaven. It's not by your might. It's not by your will. It's not by your volition. It's not by your doing. It's not by your knowledge. It's not by your money. It's not by your clout. It's not by your influence. It's not by your position. In the New Living Translation, it says it like this. John replied, God in heaven appoints each person's work. God appoints your work. Has nothing to do with you, but it has everything to do with you. So even though it's you, it's really not in relation to your so-called will. Look at the Message Bible. The Message Bible on John 3:27, it says, John answered, it is not possible for a person to succeed. I am talking about eternal success without heaven's help. You're not doing anything in a successful manner without heaven's help. God is in your so-called success. And then we have to remember that a lot of the success that we call success is not even true success. It's human success. It's what human beings see and label as success or being successful, but it's not God's type of success. It's not eternal success. But regardless, even the success of secular, so-called secular singers, I love their music. I love their jamming. I'm with it. It's still God. I didn't grow up thinking that. I felt that I couldn't listen to Whitney Houston. I couldn't listen to Michael Jackson. I couldn't listen to the Isley Brothers. I couldn't listen to Casey and the Sunshine Band. I couldn't listen to the Bee Gees. I couldn't listen to Prince, Run DMC, because they did not know God and they hadn't given their life over to God, and God is not in that. Man, I missed out on a lot of generations. Perhaps that's why I'm stuck in the 70s now. I've been stuck in the 70s music since I was, for maybe the last 20 years, I've been stuck in the 70s music. Why? I guess it's because I felt that all of that was sin music. That was devil music. That was not of God. And then I later on realized that God was in those things, in that music, in those people's hearts. And now I'm going back trying to recoup all of those years. And then you find out that most of them are dead. You're like, wow, man, I just discovered you and you're dead already. But anyway, it is what it is. It is not possible for a person to succeed without heaven's help. These people outside of so-called Christianity, they are succeeding and being successful because God is in it. God is in it. I know it seems rough. I know a lot of the lyrics today are rough, tough, but God is still operating in and working some things. And I know your religion won't allow you to say that. That's why I said it. Lamentations 3. You don't have to get in trouble because I said it for you. Lamentations 3, verses 37 and 38. Lamentations chapter 3. Lamentations, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel. If you're going into Ezekiel, you're a little too far. Lamentations chapter 3, verses 37 and 38. In the New King James Version, it says, "Who is he who speaks and it comes to pass when the Lord has not commanded it?" If you have such a so-called will, why does that verse say, "Who is he who thinks he can speak if the Lord has not called it to come to pass?" If God hasn't commanded it, your will, your abilities, your power, your influence, your might cannot bring it to pass. Is it from the mouth of the Most High that woe and well-being proceed? It says whether it's the good or the bad, it proceeds from God, the so-called bad, because what we consider as being bad is not what God considers as being bad. The way that we consider how Jesus died is not our way of how we want our children to die, but it's the way that God had to have planned it. Because who is he who can speak and it comes to pass when the Lord has not commanded it? Now, I'm going to go into that verse on other subjects, more detail and in other versions, but not right now. John chapter 19, verses 10 and 11. John chapter 19, verses 10 and 11. It says this in the New King James Version. Then Pilate, Jesus had been brought before Pilate, getting ready to go through his situation of being crucified. Then Pilate said to Jesus, because Jesus wasn't talking, he says, "Are you not going to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power, the will to crucify you? Don't you realize who I am? Don't you realize what I can do? And I have the power to release you?" The willpower to do with you, Jesus, whatever I choose. And Jesus just simply answered him. He said, Mr. Pilate, let me bust your little bubble right here. Let me help you here. I know you hadn't read the Bible and your father wasn't a rabbi and, you don't understand the scriptures. You probably don't even understand the traditions of the church. You don't even know the oral laws. But do you realize, Mr. Pilate, that you could have no power at all? No so-called willpower at all against me? Unless it had been given to you from above? You can't touch me, Mr. Pilate. That's not how this works. In relation to your so-called will to pick and to choose and to do what you want to do to whoever you want to do it because of your authority, because you're the boss, because you're the supervisor, because you're the CEO, because you're the owner, because you're whatever. You don't have the power of authority as you think. You who are in the military and you think because you're a little buck sergeant, E5, you think you can just step over everybody, or because you're a little E4, a little spec 4, you think that you you are special because they call you specialist. You think that you can dog out those who are one rank under you, who are equal to you as far as rank, but you have more time in service, and now you want to wear the sergeant stripes before you ever get them. You with the sergeant stripes, you finally got some position of authority, and now you're abusing your authority, and you're thinking you can do what you want to them, to their career, or to whatever. You who are E6s and E7s and E8s and first sergeants, sergeant majors, and you're dogging people out and you're handling your people wrong. Your master sergeants, your chief master sergeants, and you're just doing people wrong. And you think that your will is so powerful and so mighty that you can continue to do the things that you do to those under your authority. But what you don't realize is that for whatever reason, God's will and God's plan and God's purposes are falling in line with those people's lives, and you're just being used. However, there may very well come a time where you yourself, the roles will be switched, sir. The roles will be switched, ma'am, and you will fall under the authority of. And you will reap some of the things, if not all of the things, that you have sown with those underneath your position, your authority, your so-called control in relation to your so-called will. But in the Message Bible, it says right there, Jesus said, you haven't a shred of authority over me except what has been given to you from heaven. Jesus said, man, Pilate, you don't have a shred of authority over me except that was given to you from heaven. When we look at the current president and we look at Congress and we look at Senate and we look at all of those people, listen, those who are in those positions, you have no shred of authority over us except that which was given to you. And that which was given to you was rationed out by God, not by your free will, not by your position, not by your clout, not by your supporters, not by your lobbyists and whoever else. It's not by any of that stuff. Your crooked votes, your crooked electorals, it's not by any of that. It's not by your politics. Whatever you're able to have over anybody underneath you, laterally against you or beside you, or even vertically up in higher positions, you only have the power and the authority that was given to you by God. It has nothing to do with something in relation to your so-called will. Acts chapter 4. Verses 27 and 28, which will be the last verse for right now. In this particular teaching, or in this particular recording right here, part 2. We'll go into part 3. Acts chapter 4, verses 27 and 28 in the New King James Version, it says, for truly against your Holy Spirit, Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. He said, God, truly, when Jesus was brought before Herod and Pontius Pilate and before the people in that day who were at his trial and watched him walk through the city or whatever and be put up on that cross and crucified, it says, truly, God, you gave Herod and Pontius Pilate to do whatever your hand and whatever your purpose determined before to be done. He said, God, what they did had nothing to do with them. You delivered your son into their hands. You did what Jesus said when Jesus said, except it was given to you from heaven, you couldn't touch anything in regards to me. And here it says, you put Jesus into the hands of Herod and Pontius Pilate so that they could do whatever you, God, had already purposed and determined beforehand to be done to him. So it's not even your will, sir. It's not even your will, ma'am, but it's God. God gave them the authority, the inroads to do whatever was done to Jesus at that time. And that's the same way it goes with us. Whether you are under authority and they are abusing you, those in authority are abusing you, your bosses, whoever, the legal system, you have to look above the legal system, above the bosses, above Adam. You have to look above Adam and somehow see God, because really it's God who's working through them and in them, because God has a purpose for you. God has determined some things about you, everything about you beforehand to be done to you in order to get to you, in order to get you through and to where he's bringing you. So what you're going through has nothing to do with Adam's will, but is more of God's hand and God's will than it is Adam's. And as Jesus said, you have not a shred of authority over me except what has been given to you from heaven. God, whatever your hand and your purpose have determined beforehand to be done to me, that is all that can be done to me, because Adam's will is not in Adam's control. Adam's so-called will, Adam's so-called conceptual notion of his own so-called free will is not as free willy as Adam thinks. But God, you are in control of it all. And unless you do a thing, everyone else's laboring is in vain. And Adam, you have no shred of authority over me except that which was given to you from heaven, that which God's hand and his purpose had already predetermined beforehand what would be done and what type of influence that you would even have in my life, Adam. Let's go to the next one.